Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And right now, there's a hearing going on in the Idaho 4 case with Bryan Kohberger. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But today, I want to talk a little bit about Bill Thompson and the prosecution's response to Bryan Kohberger's latest alibi. Now, Bill Thompson is throwing a little fit, as we know that he likes to do when he doesn't get his way. So basically, he's filed a response to this alibi, and he's claiming to the courts that this is no alibi at all. He's claiming that Bryan Kohberger's alibi doesn't have enough specific details to really qualify as an alibi. So it basically doesn't have enough information for Bill Thompson's liking. So basically, Bill Thompson says that this is the same exact alibi that Bryan Kohberger used in the very beginning. Well, yeah, that would make sense. The defense isn't going to change their alibi. I mean, as much as the prosecution would love that, the defense is not changing their alibi. They're basically adding more details. Now, Bill Thompson doesn't believe that they added enough details. He wants more specifics. He wants a solid witness who saw Bryan Kohberger driving around alone the night of the crimes, who has a telephone number and an address. So apparently Bill has never been alone. I mean, many of us have times during the day and night where we're completely alone, where there's not someone who would be able to confirm where we are or what we're doing. So, in my opinion, Bill Thompson, he's basically nitpicking the defense because he wants the courts to reject Bryan Kohberger's alibi. He doesn't believe that it's a sufficient alibi, which brings us back to some of the people who were around these victims right before they lost their lives. I'm really curious how solid that their alibis were, being that they're really nitpicking Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Which, is his alibi important? Of course, it is important. But I really don't believe that the prosecution has a solid case at all. I think that the prosecution's case really relies on a bunch of what ifs and maybes. I don't really feel like they have a solid case. And I feel like the prosecution and Bill Thompson is demonstrating this. Bill Thompson doesn't believe that anything has been added to his alibi since the beginning. He actually says, nothing new has been discovered in this new alibi. And then in the very next sentence, he says, but there is some new information because he went to Wawewe Park. So it kind of sounds like Bill is just kind of talking. He's just kind of making things up as he goes. So basically, Bill Thompson wants this alibi rejected because he doesn't believe that it's specific enough. Now, in this response, Bill Thompson wants a more thorough alibi from Bryan Kohberger. And that makes sense. Of course, you would want, as much information as you could get. But Bryan Kohberger and the defense did mention that they would be adding more details to this alibi in the very near future. So, and we're going to get back to that because Bill Thompson also we'll just talk about it now. So Bill Thompson basically says in this response that he wants to give the defense a time limit to, submit a complete alibi. He basically wants the defense to have a time limit as to when they can do this. And that's fine. But I find it strange because what happens if after that time limit, a witness who did see Bryan Kohberger driving around that night in Pullman, Washington, comes forward? What if this witness comes forward after the defense's time limit that Bill Thompson put in place has expired? Then what? What do the courts do at that point? Do the courts say, well, okay, we have a witness here who can prove that Bryan Kohberger was driving around in Pullman, Washington, way away from the scene of the crimes. But we're not going to allow this. We're going to go ahead and just send an innocent person to death row, basically. I just don't see that happening. So it seems as though Bill Thompson is trying to put some pressure on the defense. Now, this is what I don't understand, is I don't understand why Bill Thompson is nitpicking every little thing. Bill Thompson was nitpicking the survey, and now he's nitpicking the alibi. So I don't understand why Bill Thompson is doing so much nitpicking if the prosecution has such a solid case against Bryan Kohberger. Bill Thompson says, we know where Bryan Kohberger's phone was. The map is in the PCA. That map is ridiculous. That map is a joke. But Bill Thompson is still standing on that map. It seems kind of strange because it seems like maybe they could get their experts together and figure out exactly where this phone was that night. But the way this is all going down with the prosecution and the defense, Bill Thompson has one map that it's completely ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. And Ann Taylor is basically saying that we have an expert who can confirm that Bryan Kohberger's phone was nowhere near the crime scene. So Bill Thompson doesn't like that. And at the end of Bill Thompson's response to the court, he basically says that there shouldn't be any experts allowed to testify to Bryan Kohberger's alibi. It should basically just be Bryan Kohberger defending his own alibi. So Bill Thompson doesn't like experts who, and we saw that. We saw that with the last expert. We saw Bill Thompson basically show his whole ass in court and look like a little kid as he was trying to insult this expert when it came to the survey. Now, with this expert, Bill Thompson doesn't want to hear any part of this expert. He doesn't want Bryan Kohberger to have any confirmation of anything, it seems. Which is kind of strange because you would think that Bill Thompson would expect that the defense would be bringing in people to verify their information. I mean, Bill Thompson is basically saying we want somebody who can verify this alibi, but we don't want this person to be an expert. It seems as though Bill Thompson wants to pick and choose who Bryan Kohberger can use to verify his information. Bill Thompson seems to be very concerned. In my opinion, this looks very desperate. And the prosecution, in my opinion, is beginning to look desperate. It's beginning to look like they might not really have that solid case that they've led everyone to believe that they have. So if I was the people of Moscow, Idaho, I'd be a little concerned right now. I would be a little concerned that there's someone out there with the capability of committing a quadruple homicide running around their community, because it's very possible they might not have the right suspect in court. This defendant may not be guilty of these crimes, which would mean that there's somebody out in that community who did commit these crimes. Before, they were confident because they had Bryan Kohberger. They had the goods on Bryan Kohberger. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that anywhere. I mean, what would be the harm in the prosecution coming out and saying, no, this is the evidence that we have that proves that you were at the crime scene? Why all the smoke and mirrors and all the sneaky antics and all the games being played by Bill Thompson if they have the goods on Bryan Kohberger? If their case is really that strong and they have evidence that, shows that Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes, why are they nitpicking every single thing that the defense is trying to do? Why are they? It really wouldn't matter what the defense is doing if the prosecution has information that proves that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. If the prosecution has the goods on Bryan Kohberger, they wouldn't be worried about all these little, things that the defense is doing, because they would know that they have the information. They would know that they have the rabbit in the hat, as we've talked about before. In my opinion, the prosecution's actions do not demonstrate that they have a solid case. Their actions do not scream out, confidence that they have the right guy. Now, they've got a defendant sitting there, but can they prove that this defendant is guilty? Can they prove that this defendant had anything to do with these crimes at all? Because so far, we haven't seen that, which seems very strange, because this prosecution is hell-bent on basically containing all of the information, keeping everything super secret, keeping everything behind the veil. They don't want to let any information out, not even the smallest detail. So why is that? They have their suspect in custody. He's behind bars. He's not going anywhere. So why continue with all of the secrecy? And the prosecution talks about in this response how they're concerned about being ambushed by the defense. They don't want to get this information last minute and not be able to counter this information. So they're concerned about an ambush by the defense, which is ironic because the defense has also been concerned about an ambush from the prosecution. I think we've all seen kind of an ambush coming from the prosecution, because it really doesn't seem like they have anything solid to stand on at this point. So it seems as though they're going to have some sort of magic trick that is going to pull all of this together and prove Bryan Kohberger's guilt at the end of this trial. It just seems very odd. It's very sneaky. It's a very sneaky situation. And this is something that we really don't like to see in our court systems. We want justice. And it seems as though that the families of these victims would also want justice. It seems as though they would want the right person to be convicted of this crime, and not just a stand-in, not just somebody who the prosecution railroaded into this position. It seems as though most people would want the person who actually committed this crime to be held accountable. Right now, it seems as though the prosecution is really trying to put the screws to Bryan Kohberger. And it seems as though the defense continues to try to push the prosecution for more information. And I think a lot of the reason for that is because the defense does not believe that the prosecution really has this information. I think that Ann Taylor is, I think this is an attempt from Ann Taylor to call the prosecution's bluff. And so far, the prosecution really hasn't been able to come up with much. So, is it a bluff? Does the prosecution really have the goods on Bryan Kohberger? So really, it just appears to me that Bill Thompson is having a little bit of a breakdown, a little meltdown, And, Bill doesn't want the expert when it came to the survey. Bill doesn't want an expert to confirm Bryan Kohberger's cellular phone records in order to confirm his alibi. Bill doesn't really want Bryan Kohberger to really defend himself, is what it sounds like. It sounds like Bill kind of wants to control everything that's happening in the courtroom. And when that doesn't happen, he has a meltdown. Kind of interesting to watch because, as I said, to me, it's kind of an indication that they do not have a strong case against Bryan Kohberger. If they're going to nitpick every single detail and every single thing that the defense is trying to do, then apparently the prosecution's case really is not as strong as they may have led us to believe that it was. So tell me what you think. Do you think that the prosecution is bluffing and that they do not have a solid case against Bryan Kohberger? Do you think that the people of Moscow, Idaho should be concerned right now? Because it's a good possibility that there is someone or some people who possess the capabilities to commit a quadruple homicide running around their community right now. Or do you think that, Bill is doing the right thing by nitpicking all of this information that the defense is presenting to the court? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. If you like my video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. We'll see you next time.